So everyone that will be impacted by the ethics of the situation, essentially. So the app users, which will include passengers in this case, so they're obviously impacted. Other road users like pedestrians and other drivers, everyone around those app users. The tech developers are impacted by the ethics of the situation because they have a certain amount of responsibility. The government bodies, police, enforcement, they're in general in charge of the transportation system and in charge of regulating it and enforcing it. And also engineers, city planners, and everyone who has to take these things into consideration as well. So before I get into the solution that we thought of, I just want to emphasize the principles that we based it on. So first of all, we want it to be flexible. We don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem. Every area is different, every city is different, and you need a solution that can be based on local needs and local values. So, when we're talking about ethics, we should let the people decide which ethics are important to them. We want no navigation delay, and what I mean by this is we don't want the algorithm that is calculating the shortest route, we don't want it to be impacted by the changes that we make, because we all know how annoying it could be to sit and wait for ways to figure out your path. We don't want to impact that in any negative way, and we want to prioritize safety. Okay, so the graphics are completely on. Okay, so this is the way that we've identified how these systems work nowadays. So we have a map and real-time data, and they come together to make a real-time map. Then the navigation happens, and then while you are getting from point A to point B, there are live directions. Now, we are working under the assumption that the navigation happens using a Dijkstra shortest path algorithm or a similar shortest path algorithm. It's not essential which one it is. I'm sure different systems use slightly different algorithms. So here come in the ethical modifications. So the ethical modifications will be tied to the map, which means that when the algorithm is running, they're already in there. It's not going to affect the way the algorithm runs. It's just going to add modifications to different branches of the map. And the formula of the amount of time calculated for a certain route should be the old time times the modification. So if the modification could be like a 20% increase for a specific area, and I'll specify that a little more later. Plus the real-time traffic conditions. Okay, so this example, the map has disappeared. Forgive me. Okay, so in this example, someone wants to get from point A to point B. Imagine there's a map. Now, let's say we have two routes. So route 1 takes 10 minutes, route 2 takes 10 minutes. So a shortest path algorithm is just as likely to choose either of these. Now, let's say there's a park, and we decide, you know what? The park should add 10% to the travel time. There are kids who are coming and going from the park. It's an area where people are stopping and parking. There's a lot of activity there. We want to discourage cars from driving next to the park. So let's add 10% to the travel time. So then in that case, route 1 still takes 10 minutes, but now route 2 takes 11 minutes. So it'll choose route 1 this time, and it will avoid the park. Now another scenario, on route 1 there's traffic. And the traffic adds 2 minutes to the delay. So in this case, route 1 will take 12 minutes, and route 2 will take 11 minutes. So it will take you to route 2. So the actual impact on drivers is not going to never take drivers to the places that we decide can be a problem, but it will prefer, when possible, to take them to the place where there's less of a problem. Okay, so we think that the implementation of this would have to be very flexible. We want to avoid imposing the ideas of one culture in a completely different side of the world. We know nowadays a lot of technology is developed in very specific places in the world that have their own ideas about what's important. And we think that it's not the place of a company like Google or Waze to decide what should be important to someone on the other side of the world. We want to empower the local community to decide, this is our park, let's keep cars away from here if we can. This is our school, let's keep cars away from here. And we think that transparency is very, very important, especially because, we're talking about a lot of data, a lot of stuff like that. Okay, so examples of areas where you could decide to, examples of areas that a community can decide that they want to prioritize. So you could talk about dangerous areas. So dangerous areas in this case, I'm talking about places where there are a lot of car accidents. You have roads that are prone to slipping and all sorts of stuff like that. Pedestrian safety is very important. So it'll take them further away from places where there are a lot of pedestrians. High-risk pedestrians. So in this case, we're talking about mostly children, the elderly. So, maybe it doesn't have to take the drivers next to the school every time if they're not trying to get to the school. Health centers, also a lot of high-risk pedestrians. It could take road hierarchy into account. So instead of taking you down all these little paths, it could prioritize taking you down the roads that were meant for passing traffic, which, as I'm a traffic planner, so that is helpful. Noise. So if a certain neighborhood would like to maintain its quiet and its peace, they could decide to prioritize places where the noise is echoing and stuff like that. Air quality and also animal activity. We don't have this as much, I think, in Israel, but some places of the world you have everything from moose, crocodiles, ducks, you name it, they're crossing the road. It could be a problem for them and for us. Okay, so open implementation. The idea here is that we want it to be local, and then it's a question of balancing these three types of people that could be implementing the system. So it could be local governments, right? A lot of the things that we mentioned before are within the purview of local governments. So they could decide, oh, well, there's a school here. Let's have a policy. Schools are plus 20%. We don't want people going there. Community leaders could be also another option. And another option is you could open it up to all users. And the most important thing is that there's oversight, because you don't want these systems to be abused. And the more you allow this to be managed by people, the more people could abuse the system and say, okay, well, maybe like just next to my house it should be plus 200%. I don't want people just driving by my house for no reason. So challenges to this idea. First of all, there's a challenge about which we discussed in the previous slide. Who should be the one to decide which areas are important, which areas are less important, and to what extent? The implementation could be uneven. So in that example, imagine there's a highway going in between two towns. When the highway gets traffic on it, the navigation system will take some people through those two towns. If one town is really into this system, and they make their entire town take longer artificially, the other town is going to be negatively impacted. So you want to make sure that that situation does not happen. There's a user bias. So it's going to prefer its own users over other road users, which could present a problem. It also presents a problem because as a private company, you are trying to appeal to your users already. When I download an app, I don't necessarily want the app to start thinking about everybody else but me. And oversight, which we discussed before. Now, our general recommendations, we did this project was the implementations should be careful and considered. If you over-implement, then you will cause a situation where it ends up not working. Because if every street has a reason why nobody should drive down that street, then people are just going to drive down one of those streets. It's going to be completely random. Safety first. That's probably the most important thing. It can be implemented for pedestrian use. So in that case, I'm specifically talking about pedestrian navigation apps, like Google Maps can work also for pedestrians, also for cars. And you could take pedestrians down the quieter roads, the more friendly roads for those pedestrians. I know that I've been in situations where Google Maps takes me down a road where like the sidewalk is that wide and it's very uncomfortable. We can incorporate some of these ideas into navigation alerts. So right now, if you're using Waze and you're driving next to a police or traffic or a hazard, it will tell you about that. You could also add static alerts of you are driving near a school. Pay attention to pedestrians on the way. You could add that on different levels. As we were writing this project, Waze implemented a beta to warn people when they're entering an area with a lot of traffic accidents. So it could be that this is already on its way in some form. And data transparency. That is, as far as we're concerned, a very important aspect of any technology-based solution. Any questions? Yeah?
What about the issue that Waze actually encourages the driver to break the law? I mean, what happens is that when it tells you the time it will take to reach your destination, this time is computed not by the maximum speed allowed, but the average speed that drivers go in this road. So if most of the drivers drive much very above the average the allowed speed, it just means that only if I drive in the same speed they do, I will reach, but this is against the law.
Yeah. So first of all, we didn't address that in our specific project, but I will say that from my own experience with exactly what you're saying, the fact that Waze changed it, because it used to be that Waze would show it according to the allowed speed, and then you would have people saying, "Oh, I got here 5 minutes faster than Waze. I got here 10 minutes faster than Waze." So, does Waze encourage speeding? Maybe, but is it better than encouraging speeding by making it a competition? Who gets, like, this is a problem in Israel, I think, in general. Any more questions? If Shaka Bivlit.
I think this is a very interesting topic. I lived in Los Angeles when Waze started coming out and people started having these complaints of people taking different routes through neighborhoods. But have you looked into, or what might be some of the policy mechanisms by which we get the providers to actually use this map? Because wouldn't there be an incentive for someone to be the kind of bad boy app where we don't use this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first of all, Los Angeles, when we were doing this project, we found articles about specifically the situation in Los Angeles where there were examples of people falsely reporting traffic on Waze to get people to stop driving on their road. So we did specifically look at Los Angeles as one of our examples. So the idea is that these changes are so subtle that we don't necessarily think that they will have a huge impact on the driver, because we're still taking traffic into account, and we're only adding, when you're talking about adding 10-20% to not even the entire way, but you're talking about adding it to a specific road, then the impact will more likely be just like, oh, there are two parallel roads, one runs by a school, one doesn't run by a school, let's just take you not past the school. So I don't necessarily think that this is going to have as big of an impact from the driver's point of view as that. Any more?
עברית.
כן, אפשר.
רק בשביל לראות שהבנתי, בעצם ההצעה היא להוסיף זמן למסלול שעובר דרך בית הספר, ולהציג אותו לנהג, כעוד אופציה.
לא. אז כשאנחנו מקבלים, כשאנחנו שמים בווייז את היעד שלנו, הוא לא מציג כל אופציה. במיוחד אם אתה נגיד יוצא מהבית שלך בשכונת מגורים, ונוסע לעבודה נגיד, או לכל מקום אחר, הוא לא מראה לך כל אופציה של לנסוע דרך כל כביש בשכונת מגורים, נכון? אז הרעיון זה שהוא פשוט יתעדף, כשהוא שולח אותך בתוך השכונות האלה, יתעדף את הרחובות שהם הכי פחות בעייתיים. והוא לא יציג לך, הוא רק מציג לך את השלוש אופציות הכי טובות. אז ברמת האלגוריתם זה פחות יציג לך דברים, מסלולים שהם יותר בעייתיים.
נכון, אבל הזמן הוא מחושב על משהו שהוא לכאורה לא אובייקטיבי. בניגוד לפחות לאלגוריתם של ווייז, אף אחד כנראה לא יודע איך עובד, אבל לכאורה כן אובייקטיבי על בסיס המהירויות הממוצעות. פה בעצם אנחנו מוצאים איזשהו מרכיב,
אתי.
כמו שציינת, באתגרים של הפגישה הזאת, שהם יותר סובייקטיביים.
נכון, כי אתיקה זה תחום סובייקטיבי בסופו של דבר.
ואז איך המשתמש בעצם מבין את דרך
אז זה משהו שאנחנו גם כן חשבנו עליו במהלך הפרויקט ולא הכנסנו את זה למצגת, אבל זה גם שאלה של האם להציג למשתמש הנה זה הנסיעה היותר אתית שאתה יכול לקחת, האם להציג את זה ברמה הזאת. אני אישית חושבת שלא כדאי, אני חושבת שזה פשוט יגיד לו הנה תיסע דרך פה ולא דרך פה כי כאן יש בית ספר וכאן אין בית ספר. אז אני חושבת שפשוט צריך להמשיך להציג לנהג כמו שזה, ואולי גם להציג לנהג כי בסופו של דבר האלגוריתם מחשב את זה עם תוספת זמן. כי באלגוריתם מסלול קצר הוא פשוט מנסה לקצר זמן. בכל זאת כדאי להציג, כאילו שהזמן שמציגים לנהג זה יהיה הזמן האמיתי, בלי התוספות. זה אופציה. לא ירדנו לפרטים האלה. יש עוד שאלות?
צריכים לעבור
Like a side issue, Waze encourages the user to do illegal activities in that they say to you, is the traffic jam still there, right? And then they want you to press if it's there or not. I mean, there are some situations where they say, oh, you have to certify that you're the passenger. So that's at least you're forcing people to lie. But there are a lot of situations where it just says, is it still there?
Yeah. So that is not, that's not what our project was dealing with. That's a UI problem. And that's also a really good question of, the way they collect data is from users inputting data, right? So they're relying on you to input that data. A system like Google Maps, they just take everyone's location and they just base it on that. So, pros and cons to each system. Thank you very much.
תודה רבה.